Welcome to the S.J. Child Show, where a little bit of knowledge can turn fear into understanding. Enjoy the show.
Hi, and welcome to the S.J. Child Show. I'm really excited today to have this conversation with Dr. Joel Davis Brown. He is coming to us this morning from New York. You are in New York today, right? Is
Yes,
that
I
what
am
you
in New
said?
York, the Big Apple. Yes.
Yes. We're so glad to have you here today. I'm looking forward to our conversation and finding out about your what you do and what you have passions about. So let's just get started at the beginning. Give us an introduction about who you are and what brought you here today.
Oh, wow. Who am I? Um, I guess for these purposes, I'm an author. So I just published a book in February entitled The Souls of Queer Folk: How Understanding LGBTQ Culture Can Transform Your Leadership Practice. And it's a culmination of work I've been doing now for quite some time and a research interest I had. And the book I don't want to say it was an accident, but in reality, it was an accident. Most of the things that have happened to me in my life have come about just by, I wouldn't say happenstance, but just being in the right place at the right time. And essentially, what the book is discussing highlights is the need for queer leadership. Why is that? In a time when we're dealing with more unpredictability as a world, as a collective, my thought is who better to learn from than those who live with unpredictability all the time? And that would be those who live on the margins of society, particularly those who are minoritized. And the LGBTQ population is one that has not only learned how to thrive with unpredictability in the form of bias and discrimination and stigmatization, but has been able to thrive. And so as we came through and have come through COVID, inflation, layoffs, um, war, polarization, extremism, all these different things, it occurred to me at some point there might be something here that the world could use and benefit from if we took the time to actually look and listen to a community that, frankly, many of us don't spend a lot of time thinking about and don't spend a lot of time giving perhaps proper due and respect to. So that's what led me to write my book. And since then, I've just been talking more about what this actually means, and it's been fun. It's something that I can tell you has taken me in directions and places I didn't think it would. And but more importantly, it's about creating the impact for people, and particularly for, I would even say queer youth who may have thought, "What value do I have?" And that wouldn't be hard to fathom given all the legislation that's taking place. So to have people and to have young people in particular to say, what's my value? And to read this book and hopefully understand and affirm their value is something that's really important for me. So that's why I'm here. I own a consulting firm. I own two, and two businesses, and I've been in the consulting world for about 25 years doing work related to organizational and systems development, which is just a very academic and fancy way of saying how do we help our environments to thrive and do better? And how do we make sure that humans can work together successfully? That's what I work to do.
I love that. I think that that is a common goal we that you and I have in common. I just want to see the change for the greater good. And I totally agree with you that it comes from learning how to listen, learning how to be an active and an open listener to the people in the world who are making changes. And as kind of interesting, I know that a lot of the autistic community, there's a big connection between,
Yeah.
and so in kind of where I stand in the same exact thing is that we need to hear voices from the people who are being um, discriminated against or pushed down. And we need those voices to be the ones that we listen to so that we can learn how to move forward and accommodate people with dignity and humanity. And I completely agree with that. I think that that's it's almost kind of like where we start is by listening.
I would agree. And I would say it even goes beyond, because most people would say, oh, it's important to listen to different groups because we want to figure out how to be more inclusive. And where my book goes even a step further is to say it's not only about being more inclusive, but how to even lead your own life, how to take your life forward. There is value and wisdom in what the queer community has that's been instructive and successful for us that could be helpful for other people. Now, some people, and I've heard this question before, some people have said to me, so do you mean I have to be queer? Do you mean I have to be LGBTQ to, what are you saying? My point to them is, no, you don't have to be LGBTQ. The beauty is you can learn from our community about how to improve your own life. Leadership is not just something that is relegated to the business world. So I've had a number of people who have said to me, oh, so this is a business book. This is an academic book. And I said, well, leadership has a personal dimension. Before you lead others, you have to lead yourself. And those who do that, I think, are much more successful than those who don't. And I learned leadership first and foremost, not in a boardroom and not with a team. I learned it in the home with my family. I learned it from my mom. I saw her example. And I also remember her instructions of don't walk with your head down, be proud of who you are, know where you came from, treat everyone with respect, know that no one is better than you and you are no better than anybody else. Those are personal leadership maxims and ideas that help me to become the leader I am. So when we think about leadership, it doesn't mean that you have to be the head of, the world or a nation. It's how do you lead the person who you see in the mirror? How do you lead your family? How do you lead your friends? Because those all have leadership dimensions. And then beyond that, then how do you impact, let's say, the workplace, a team, a project, and then an organization? So the book can be read at different levels. It can be read as kind of a growth, personal growth book, a cultural attaché, a leadership development book. But it's also, I think, just a recipe for how can each of us be better. And I think we can all learn from any group and any person given the right context. My grandfather says you can learn from what people do wrong and you can learn from how and what people do right. And in this situation, what I'm inviting people to do is to think about how can we learn more from the queer community in terms of what they do right? Because if you think about it, if you have, at least right to, as of this moment, over 600 pieces of legislation that are aimed targeting the LGBTQ community and people are still able to get up and have dignity, that to me, if I were not part of the community, I would say, I want to learn something about that. I want to get some information there. I want to bottle whatever it is that they have and they possess and bring it into my own life. And so that's, I think, the lesson for our time and the opportunity that we have before ourselves in the present day.
I love that. Now, let's say we're having a discussion and we want to bridge the topic with our kiddos. What
Mhm.
is a great way to start that discussion?
Well, I think that's a really great question. So I think number one, just helping young people to recognize we all are different and we all have gifts, and those gifts look differently, and recognizing that all of us come with a special set of skills, and those skills can be packaged in a number of different ways. I think that's the first thing. And, I have my best friend, for example, talks to his daughter about the fact that the rainbow people, as he calls us, have superpowers, and we all have superpowers. And just like, for example, let's say Superman or Superwoman have super talents that allow them to fly. And then you have, let's say, Storm. I'm going to kind of sound like a geek here. Storm from X-Men has the ability to control the elements. All of us have these different talents. And if we want to be better people and we want to grow and reach our potential, it's all about learning how to, what those different talents are and how we could use those ourselves to be better and to help people, because that's what we're here to do. And that's a really wonderful way, I think, of talking to kids about this, is to say, we all have something to offer, and we're better when everybody's able to share that collectively so that we can all collectively improve.
Isn't that the truth? And it really starts with our young people too. And the earliest and the soonest we can start those conversations and normalize those conversations, the better off we are as a society and our future generations to come. What about when, if we're talking about maybe a parent who is unsure of how to support their teen? What kind of
Mhm.
guidance would you give to them?
When you say support their teen, are they a teen
Or I
who
guess their
is?
child or anybody that might be wondering how to, or maybe wondering if they might be queer, and like how would parents help their child find support in these days?
I think the first thing is letting them know that whoever they are is perfect. I can imagine, or I remember, I was going through my own realization, if you will. And what would have really helped me is just knowing that I have safety and knowing that no matter how things shake out, that I have a place to go. And eventually I did realize that, but it wasn't obvious to me at the beginning that I had people who were behind me that were in my corner no matter what. And I think also giving people the space and time. So let me give an example of what not to do. And this is coming from someone who is well-meaning. So I know some folks, I have some acquaintances or associates whose child they suspected was queer. And so they went to them and said, we suspect that you're queer. And anytime you want to talk about it, you can. Well, that puts the child on the hot seat. That makes them feel a little defensive. And even though it may be clear to other people, or I should say, maybe there's a suspicion that they're LGBTQ identified. You don't really know until the person tells you, right? So you want to give the person the space, your child, your teenager, whomever they might be, the space to figure things out on their own. Expose them to, I would say, different role models to let them know that there's no one way to be anything. So just like, for example, there's no one right way to be an American, there's no one way to be LGBTQ. And I know for me, when I was coming out, that was what I struggled with because there was an image that was portrayed and a lot of it was stereotypical. And I thought, well, you know, I feel different. I think I have something in common, but I don't fit this stereotype, or that's just not me. And so I think, helping young people to see the variety and the diversity within the community, exposing to different people, but doing so in an indirect way so that the child still feels like they're safe, they're comfortable, but they're not being pressed and they're not being put on the hot seat and they're not being put on edge. And continue to then also educate oneself to recognize different things and to learn more about the community because the community, goes beyond what we think it is. I remember I was actually on a flight to Salt Lake and this gentleman was asking me about where I was headed. And my final destination was Chicago. And I was going to the Gay Games, which is the largest um, I guess, amateur athletic competition for the LGBTQ community in the world. Every year we get together and this Olympic style event, and there's about 40 plus events and sports that you participate in. So this gentleman sitting next to me said, "Oh, so are you going there to party?" And I said, "Well, no, I'm going there to compete, And in that moment, as we were talking, I realized that he still had this image and he thought he was being supportive, but he hadn't taken time to really interrogate his own mind to say, where might I be supporting and furthering stereotypes? It's like there's nothing wrong with going out, but there are plenty of us within the community who do many other things besides going out to a bar. In fact, I don't really go out to bars that much, not because there's anything wrong with it. I just don't find enjoyment there. So I think those are the three things: psychological safety, making sure that you expose your child and your teenager to a variety of different people and recognize that there's no one right way to be queer or gay. And then doing your own work so that when the time is right, then you're not sending your child back into the closet or causing harm for them.
That's so great too. And it's so important that we give our kids all access to a lot of different tools to use so that they can pick up what works for them and leave what doesn't. And
Yeah.
in that, we also need to recognize that the things we do provide for them, they aren't our expectations of what we want from them or what we have from them. They're like laying out a buffet and letting them choose rather than putting a plate of what you decide they're going to eat in front of them.
Right.
It's so much like that.
Yeah, there's a phrase that has always stayed with me, and it's something that I'm thinking about now as I now contemplate fatherhood is recognizing that children don't come from you, they come through you.
Yeah.
And the idea that they pass through you into this world, but they have their own ideas and views and needs and expectations and personalities and sensibilities. And our job as parents is to help them reach their potential on their terms, whatever is right for them, not to make them mini me's or clones of who we are.
Exactly.
Which I think for a lot of parents, and who doesn't want your child to, have similar interests and to do certain things? And I get it, but I think that can be a very dangerous thing. And so letting them develop on their own and letting them be their own special person is the best thing I think any parent can do.
And I have personal experience here because I have a 23-year-old that I've already raised a human, and I have a 13 and 11-year-old. And the most that I have learned in these decades of raising and watching and listening and learning and making so many mistakes is now when my 11-year-old, I follow. I will lead her to good places for her to choose from,
Mm-hmm.
but I follow. I learned that if
Mm,
I take the lead, then I am controlling every step of the way. And
mm-hmm.
that makes them uncomfortable. It ends up making me uncomfortable. And I really learned a big lesson in that. And bless my daughter's heart for being the guinea pig of that. But she's that's a whole nother episode. But
Mm,
um to understand how to now follow the lead of someone who, like you said, you have brought in through, they have come through you, and you're constantly learning because number one, they're smarter than you. I'm sorry, people. I'm sorry, parents. You think you're smarter than your kids? You need to take a look in the mirror because that is not
mm,
true. We
mm,
never had the information available to us that they have now to them,
right.
and we cannot shut it down from them. That's their access to the world. We
Mm,
cannot decide what they're going to see and not see. They're susceptible to everything, and
yes.
that is very scary. And we have to be very smart in the way that we offer information, in the way that we keep them safe. But like I said, it's not in controlling what they see and what they look at. It's in following and then discussing along the way. Is this
Mm,
something that you found that makes you uncomfortable? Why
mm,
is that? Did you
mm,
get like an uncomfortable feeling in your gut? Remember that so that next time something like that happens, you follow that instinct
mm.
rather than decide and go just off of your brain's,
Right.
your so it's been an interesting way to be a parent, but I'm finding a lot more success in it for both
What
of
I'm
us.
hearing from what I'm hearing from you is the whole mutual mentoring concept of you're there to mentor them and they're there to mentor you. They're going to give you insight that you didn't have. Um, I'm always impressed when I talk to my nieces and nephews about what they see, how they're perceiving things, and um, thinking, wow, was I that perceptive when I was their age? Was I able to see things? And, I think children are very intelligent. I think children are very observant. I think they see a lot more than we give them credit for. And I think the best thing that I try to do as an adult with any person, period, but particularly with young people, is to get out of the way, is to not short circuit their learning, their growth because of my own ego and my own need to project something onto them that has nothing to do with them. It's about my own unsatisfied needs from perhaps my own childhood, right? So
Exactly.
good sage advice for anybody, in particular, as I start thinking about this journey as well.
Yeah. It's just really, it really is a learning lesson in stopping unconditioning yourself from years of conditioning from other types of parenting, and really taking the initiative and the intent to want to see this person grow as an individual from their own standpoint. That was
Yeah.
something that I never had growing up, was to be my own person. How I was one, I was from a military family and
Mm,
religious background, and boy, but I'm neither of the two now. And so
mm,
it's interesting, without the expectations on my children that they have to follow either of those things. They're making their own way in the world and also having their own empowerment and their own autonomy in learning how to make decisions that might go wrong, right? Because
Right.
isn't that one of the most important things is that we learn from our mistakes, but we also know that we can have that safe place at home to
Right.
come back to.
And that's honestly where a lot of my research around the community was born from. I mean, I grew up thinking it was so clear to me what it meant to be Black, um, in implicit and explicit ways, but it wasn't necessarily clear for me what it meant to be LGBTQ. And as I was beginning that journey, a lot of what I had to uncover and what I had to peel away were family expectations, parental expectations, and this idea that somehow I had to be someone different. And I remember having a conversation with my dad shortly after I came out, and him basically saying to me at some point, well, you all go do whatever you want to do. And because he was so angry because he felt that I was defiling or defying him as opposed to just embracing myself. And as he said that, and as he made, this comment of, you know, this is wrong and how dare you do this, what it led to me to think of is, what is it that we do that makes people so disgusted or hate who we are? And from that standpoint, I said to myself, there's a lot more to our community than what we're aware of, what they're aware of, and frankly, what many of us within the community are aware of. And I'm not here to convince somebody of our worth, but I do want to at least make information available so that people who want to know can understand. No, we're not a caricature. We're not this, uh, whatever you want to call it, this. We're not possessed of something evil or whatnot. We're not aliens. I'm not going to say regular people, but we are regular people. And that's what led me to do my research. And in doing the research is when I was like, well, the things that we stand for, the things that are important for our community, the things that we symbolize are really important for the world. Because if you look at what people say they want from modern leaders, all these things are present. So it was from that the book really took on kind of an even different theme, because I realized there's more here than perhaps even I had realized. But it all began from that little boy so many years ago, just saying, I just want to be myself. And I don't and cannot be someone else, and I can't be what you expect me to be.
How has that relationship changed? Has it improved and if you're comfortable
Oh,
answering
yeah,
that
absolutely.
question?
Absolutely. It's actually going to be the subject of my next book, because my next book is on healing. It has it has gone through ups and downs. I think what's changed is my relationship with myself. So what do I mean by that? You get to a place, hopefully, where you realize there's nothing wrong with me, and I'm no longer willing to entertain questions that suggest that something is. It also means establishing boundaries to say, I'm not having this conversation. So I appreciate that you are thinking in this way. That's for you to work out on your own time. When you come in my space, I am no longer willing to entertain any of that energy. And I'm sure, as you know, when you set boundaries with people, sometimes people get upset because they're wanting or expecting to treat you in a certain way. And you say, well, not today, not anymore, not ever. So I would say to you, our relationship now is decent. And what do I mean by decent? Now, I kind of liken it to these two Cold War powers like the US and what used to be the USSR, but now Russia. There's been a detente, there's been a thawing of the cold. We've restored diplomatic relations. Is it warm and fuzzy? No, I would say that my relationship with my dad still feels very heady, and it feels in some ways very formal, which is directly the opposite of the relationship I have with my mom, where it's warm, it's familiar, it's vulnerable, it's joyous, it's heart centered, it's real, it's candid, and it's safe, right? But I also know that with my dad at this point, any safety, anything that I need, I give to myself. And I've learned to have compassion for him, but to not give him compassion at the expense of my well-being. So we talk weekly. Would I say that it's you know, deep gut-wrenching conversation? No. But what I've learned about my dad is there's a reason why he is the person who he is. And I've learned to kind of become more aware of that and not to judge him, but to understand him so that when I get a reaction, I know it's not about me and I can kind of just dismiss it as such. And also say, I don't want to deal with this. And so, wishing him well and say, yeah, I think you need to deal with it. But I think he recognizes there's a boundary. But yeah, the relationship has come full circle. I mean, we've gone through so many battles over the years, and um, you get to a point where you just say, "I'm done battling," and here's the price of admission. If you want to play, you want to
Mm-hmm.
engage me, then these are the things that you will do. And so there's, I think, appreciation. Um, there's appreciation. There is engagement, but I would say it doesn't go to the heart level like I think it does.
Yeah.
But he's gotten and made tremendous strides since then, since when I first came out. And I've come to I've had the peace of mind that it will be what it's going to be, and I've done all I can to make it better, and that gives me peace of mind with it.
Oh, I just love that. And it's so important that you have that for yourself because,
Right.
like you said, everyone else's journey is where they're at, and there's no amount of wanting them to be anywhere else that gets them there.
Right.
And if it's, I think I read a quote just last week that said, you think it's so hard, or if you think it's easy to make change for someone else, now I'm going to say it wrong. Anyways, the point is, it's so hard to change. And if you can't even make your own changes, why in the heck can you think you can make changes in somebody else's mind?
Correct.
Is the point. And so it is so true. What do you think when we are now like moving into the workspace and into more like public community, how can we better serve and be more inclusive as a society?
Yeah. I think we have to recognize that inclusion is not just about awareness, and it's not just about a history lesson. So what do I mean by that? It's not just so in the wake of George Floyd's murder, I had a number of because I'm a consultant. I didn't share that in my introduction, but I'm a consultant. I own a consulting firm. Been doing this for 20 plus years, and I had a very thoughtful CEO tell me that he had gone to the Civil Rights Museum in Montgomery, Alabama, which is great. And I asked him, "What are you going to do with that? How does that impact the lives of your employees?" And he couldn't answer that. And that is the reason why this work is so important. So I think the first thing is to be aware that there are different realities. And as shocking as it is, in July of 2023, there are still people who do not understand that there are different realities. And there are people who don't understand that those different realities have nothing to do with the person's character. They have nothing to do with the person's actions or behaviors. Sometimes people are denied opportunities or treated a certain way simply because they are different. So I think helping people to understand this. So there's a level of global awareness that has to take place. Once there, though, understanding, well, what does that, understanding that it's not going to change on its own. So we each have responsibility. And so I love, for example, when I'm in these fora or I'm in these meetings with community members and they say things like, um, you know, they need to do something, or the work needs to be done, or society has to change things, or the organization has to change things. And I said, well, the organization and society consists of people, and the people is us. So what are you going to do? And so then from there, helping people to understand that doing something does not require perfection, because you'll never be perfect. I have been doing the work now for, as I said, 25 years. I am not perfect in the work, but it requires a level of discipline and it requires a level of honesty and grit and determination and resilience to say, sometimes I'm going to mess it up. And sometimes I'm going to do things that and say things that are impolite or not precise. But what do I do with that information and learn? And that's where it really comes down to, behaviors. So, for example, how do you engage people? Now, some of this is not rocket science because, a lot of it comes back to how do you treat human beings as human beings, right? If you see, for example, I remember there was some incident in the news and someone said, well, my colleagues, I think, are upset about this. What do I do? And I said, well, what would you want people to do if they knew you were upset? You want someone to say, hello, are you okay? Is there anything I can do? You might want to educate yourself about it, whatever that it is before then. But we also have to recognize that, and I think that's the biggest thing. I mean, there's tactical things that people can do, but I see a lot of people waiting for permission, thinking that they have to be some Zengali or some expert to do this work right. And you just have to, the first thing you have to do is just get your feet in the water, just get your legs in the shell and in the pool and to swim a little bit. And then to recognize that the work is ongoing. It's not something that I would say you have to focus on every single minute of the day, but look at your interactions as learning opportunities. How could I be better there? And also recognizing that the way that we see the world is just our way of seeing the world, which doesn't necessarily mean that's the way that others see the world, or that's the way that the world operates and exists. So those are I would say, the first few things is just building the awareness, recognizing that there's an opportunity for each of us to do something, and then taking the first steps to do it, and recognizing that it has to go beyond knowledge and history lessons and reading books. It translates into how you treat others, and knowing that sometimes the way that we treat others is not because we're bad people. It's just that we've grown up in a system, in a family, in a city where doing things a certain way was normalized, and maybe in other places is not normalized. And that doesn't make someone necessarily a bad person. It just means that we have to recognize that of all the people on this earth, I think they're what, 8 billion, close to 8 billion, maybe. We need to recognize where our work begins and where it ends. And there's an opportunity for us to adjust how we communicate, even the idea of how do we lead. And that's the question. When I was coming of age in corporate America, being a leader meant you didn't ask questions. Being a leader meant that you always seemed confident. You were in control. It meant that you always had this steely demeanor. Well, that doesn't work for everybody, and that didn't work for me either, right? So then recognizing, well, it's like, going back to raising a kid. The way that you're going to parent one is not how you're going to parent the other, and recognizing that, and in doing so, saying to yourself, this impacts the entire team and the entire organization in our community. So those are the things I would say is get in the game, recognize that you're not going to be perfect, and be okay with not being perfect, but be resolved to do better at all times.
Agreed. I couldn't agree with you more on that. I think that, it's so important, especially for me, for what I'm doing right now, is to try to understand across all categories, all boards, all everything, how to, number one, make people feel supported, let them know that their voices can be elevated. And I completely support that. I think that, and it must be from my mom. My mom must have given me the special gift of just being in love with humanity. Because I can remember, I just had this strange flashback of us on a camping trip. And we're walking, and there was like a group of special needs kids or something. And I remember her reaction, and it was overjoyed. She was so excited to see these kids and to interact and to smile and to hug them. And it showed me like this beauty to be to people. Sorry, it just made me so emotional. And it really like resonated within me how special you can help make people feel. And it's such an interesting like skill, I guess you could call it, but I find it to be such a positive thing that can't be taught. I'll tell you that because having children, like they are so very different from me. I can't even tell you. And to know that like I somehow developed this skill to want to love people. It doesn't
Mm.
matter who, how, where they're from, anything. I just have this desire to know more about people, to want to understand people, to let people know that they're special, that they are valued, that they have, a space, and that so it's so nice to for you to write this book and really elevate the voices in your community. I'm just so honored that you came today to share that with us. Tell us where we can go to support you, to find the book, excuse me, anything like that, websites, all the good stuff.
Sure. So the book is available on all major platforms: Amazon, Barnes and Noble, um, oh gosh, Apple, wherever you want to. You name it. You can order in your local bookstore. You can find me on LinkedIn, Joel Davis Brown. You can also go to my personal website, joeldavisbrown.com, which should be ready any day now. So you'll see it fresh. And then my business website, which is pneumos.com. That's PNEUMOS.com. And I think also Instagram, although I try to stay off of social media because social media seems so toxic these days. So I like pictures. So
Yes.
Instagram seems safe. I have not really got into the TikTok space yet. Twitter, I've kind of abandoned because, Twitter just seems to be full of angry, menacing people.
Oh.
Uh, but you can find me in any of those places. And what I would say to people, if you engage the book, if you buy the book, please, it's not a vanity project. And so I encourage people to read it, to engage it, to really learn from it, because I think it can help people to be better and grow, and it can help you to support others, and to help be better global citizens. So I want to thank you for your story, and I want to thank you for creating the space for this conversation. And each of us is doing our part. And if we can continue to do our part and support each other, we meet in the middle. And when we meet in the middle, hopefully a lot of this work won't necessarily be done, but it will be elevated, and it will be easier for the next generation to come.
Isn't that the truth? I agree with you there. It's just been such a pleasure to speak with you this morning, and thank you so much for your time. And we'll definitely be following you and supporting you. And please keep in touch so we can know what's next, on board.
Oh, absolutely. Next is audiobook. So that will be coming fairly soon. So yeah.
Great. Fantastic. Well, I'm looking forward to staying in touch, and you take care, and we'll talk soon.
All right. Thank you. Thank you to your audience. Be well.